All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is the first webinar focusing on the NOAA Transformational Habitat Award. We'll just give it another minute or two, make sure everybody gets on board, and then we'll get started. All right, everyone, good afternoon, and welcome to this first webinar focusing on the NOAA Transformational Habitat Award. This is going to be a two-topic focused on this first webinar. KJ is going to be going over her topic just after me, but for all of you who don't know who I am, I'm Daniel Kolodny. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the NEP and the Federal Grants Manager. What I'm going to be focused on is invoicing and documentation requirements for the NOAA award. So I'm going to kind of go over three topics here, and the first one's going to be the invoice format itself. Then we'll be looking at some backup documentation requirements and by object class, so we'll go through all the different object classes, and then proof of payments where applicable. And so let's start with what the invoice itself should look like. Many of you have already done this. Here's a typical invoice, and I actually kind of took this from UCF. They had a pretty good template to start with. So what you're going to see is on top, and circled here in blue, is the name invoice. And you should also have your organization name and address, and feel free to put your logo on there if you wish. Second, you want to make sure it's made out to myself and the Lagoon Council. So in IRL Council, my name, our address there. Next, you want to have an invoice number, and this is important for our ledger, for general ledger documentation, how much the invoice is for, and the date that you are submitting the invoice. Also, you can see there on the left-hand column a period, and this is really important. So when are the expenditures occurred that you're invoicing for? So say it's Q1, that would be 10/1/2024 through 12/31/2024, and so on. Next, you're going to have the name of your project. So whatever is listed in your contractual agreement, you're going to want to put that in there as the name of the project. Really importantly is all the object classes that you see here, and every invoice should have all these. Even if you don't have that in your budget, definitely make sure all of them are listed, and then you can fill those in the columns you see there on the right accordingly. And so that should be personnel, fringe benefits, travel, equipment, supplies, contractual, construction, other, and indirect if you have that. And you should also list your rate if you have it in your budget. Next is during that period, what kind of how many expenditures from that specific object class are you asking for, and personnel, fringe benefits, and so on should be in that current column, and then there'll be a total at the bottom. And then as you invoice, throughout the entire period, that cumulative row should start adding up as you go, shown here. Next, you just want to have it signed by an authorized person from the organization, and also have instructions on how you'd like your payment received. Is it going to be a check, a ACH through, and that should include like the bank info, any address of a check, and who it's made out to. All that should be included as well. And all this is based on chapter 200, section 200, 400, subpart E on cost principles. So let's now look at our backup documentation requirements for each object class. And so the first one we're going to start with is personnel. And so the acceptable forms would either be an employee timesheet that has the number of hours signed by the employee and the supervisor, or a copy of the payroll report register that's accepted and approved in accordance with generally accepted accounting practices. If you have an independent audit, they probably know exactly what that looks like. And for either option above, details in the payroll should be supported by time and attendance records. And this is really, really important when you have somebody that's their time is split between multiple grants or multiple awards. Federal requirements sometimes require you to show, that you're not using grant funds from one to support another project. So we definitely need to show that split if there is multiple funding sources involved on an individual. When we look at fringe, this could be copies of those payroll reports or registers that match the approved percentage rate, associated with your personnel costs that was in the approved budget within the agreement, or copies of pay stubs showing deductions and then payments to benefit companies, like receipts or invoices from those benefit companies. Support for these could be an Excel table, listing each employee, the associated fringe being requested either by actual cost or that approved rate. And you should also document that with your established personnel compensation policy and make sure that you apply it consistently. When we go to travel, those are expenses on official business, such as transportation, lodging, and per diem. You may charge them on an actual cost or per diem or mileage allowance basis, or a combination of the two, according to the policies of your organization. They should be consistent and supported by either federal and non-federal sources. And there must be approved and authorized cost evidence. And so some of the acceptable forms could be mileage. So if you're claiming the mileage, you want to have a map of directions or amount of miles on that route taken. They must follow either your company's policy rate or the GSA approved rate, which is currently 67 cents, although that's going to change probably on January 1. So be sure to make sure you're aware of any changes on that. Per diem is also based off GSA, based on the location you travel to. So if you're traveling, up to DC for an official part of this grant, then you're going to look at the rates approved for Washington, DC. Again, if you're doing any overnight stays, they have to be more than 50 miles from the location of departure. Lodging, you want to do either per diem that's approved for that location or actual hotel folios. Reservation details are not going to be acceptable proof of documentation. And then if you have airfare, that's going to be just receipts from the airline showing that you made the payment and the time of the travel. Any tolls, rentals, Ubers, parking, all that should be supported with receipts, just showing that you made the payment and when it was purchased. We get to equipment object class. This is for capital expenditures, anything over $10,000, and it's direct costs. Acceptable forms is going to be a copy of an itemized invoice of purchase for the equipment from a vendor, and it does require a proof of payment, and I'll get to that in a little bit more later. When we look at supplies, these are direct costs that can be identified specifically with a particular cost objective. They are usually well under $10,000, and you can use that. You can see the reference code there of Chapter 200, Section 405. And the acceptable forms are this as an itemized invoice or for the purchase of that supply. You want an itemized receipt of the direct costs purchase, and it requires a proof of payment. When we're looking at the contractual object class line item, this is most likely from a for-profit company. This is going to be an itemized invoice from that contractor that details those services that were provided from them. And it's also going to require proof of payment. Construction, even though I'd like you to have it listed on your invoice, none of you are going to be using this as it wasn't included by any of the subawardees in their individual budgets. So I'm just kind of touching base here that we're not going to have any of it, but just please include it on your invoice. Other object class, this is a lot like contractual, but it's usually from a not-for-profit company, a local government, a state agency, or it could be a direct item that doesn't really fit into a supplies object class. And so again, acceptable forms are going to be a copy of an itemized invoice from the organization that details services and or goods provided, and then requires your proof of payment. For indirect, this is going to be most likely from major institutions of higher education, some nonprofits. These are going to be classified either as facilities and administration. Again, these are going to be either pre-negotiated rates with the federal government or the de minimis, which is 10%. And a lot of you I know have waived that indirect on your invoices. If you do have it in your budget, you want to have a couple of things, either the approved negotiated rate listed. Make sure again that rate is listed on the invoice. If it's a modified direct percentage, and I know a couple of you have that, just explain how that was calculated, either in the backup documentation or somewhere on the invoice to show how that was come about. And so the last thing I have in my little overview here of invoicing and documentation is just proof of payment requirements where applicable. And so, when required, proof of payment can be documented by these 5 different methods, and a couple are just kind of options if you don't have one or the other. So the first one would be an itemized receipt from that vendor showing the date of the payment method. It could be like a credit card, check number, cash, whatever that is. If it's paid with a check, you're going to need to include an image of that cash check to be included in your package. If it's done by ACH, then you need an accounts payable history report that shows that bank name, reference number, supplier ID, supplier name, the amount, and the payment date. If it's a credit card, you were paid with a credit card, you don't have that actual physical receipt and itemized invoice from the vendor, you could use that credit card statement as a way to make up for that. And then also, if you don't have the check image or the ACH, you could use a bank statement showing that debit was made in your bank account. But you can reach out to me and we'll work on what's needed if something's missing here. And that's all I have regarding invoicing and proof of payments.
Cool. Okay, so I'm gonna switch gears and talk about the required reporting real quick. Let me get my notes up. All right, so I think I know most of the names on the list, but for those that I haven't, my name's KJ Ayres, and I'm the GIS data scientist for the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program. Today, we're going to be kind of walking through the reporting requirements for the NOAA Habitat Restoration Grant, specifically for the system-wide habitat restoration through an integrated community of practice through the IRL. All right. So originally we have points of contacts for all of our 15 different sites, our 10 sub-awards, and I put on there every habitat type for each location. So you'll see like Karen Bay, for example, has salt marsh and clams at their location. And then if we look down at the Satellite Beach Aquatic Habitat Mosaic, they have oyster reef, seagrass, and mangroves. The reason why I put all the different habitats in is because Each habitat type within the project has a unique reporting form and has unique needs that need based on restoration activities performed. So I'm going to use Karen Bay as an example because it's 1A throughout the whole thing. So for the different reporting requirements, accurate and timely reporting is critical for compliance for the NOAA requirements and for tracking the progress of our overall restoration efforts. This process involves completing various forms and reports. So the 4 reports that we're going to have are a pre and a post construction form required for every single habitat type. A quarterly monitoring report form, again, per each habitat form, a biannual PPR or a performance progress report, and a biannual administrative report, which kind of goes over administrative compliance and budget utilization. I'm going to provide more details and dates for when these are all due for each of the projects. And I'm also going to be sending out kind of reminders to you for everybody so we have them in our calendars. So our pre and post construction forms. These are essential for documenting any baseline conditions and outcomes of the restoration activities. So these forms must be completed once NOAA approves our monitoring plan. This on the right-hand side is just a pre and a post construction form for oyster reefs. So I've made them for every single habitat type within, got a Q&A. All right. So where I kind of lost where I was going with that. Anyway, so every habitat type means that you're going to have to fill out these forms. So again, I'm using Karen Bay as an example. They had seagrass and salt marsh, so they're going to have to fill out 2 pre-construction forms, 1 per habitat type. These are going to be available in the monitoring plans, and we're going to send out the data entry forms and the actual links for the uploads. So I kind of put on there at the bottom just some little notes. So pre-construction, 30 days prior to construction, it's going to be a one-time event. So you're only going to fill out the form once. And then post-construction, it's due after the first year. And again, a one-time event. So quarterly monitoring forms. So these are vital for kind of the project's ongoing assessment. So these forms are required for each habitat type every quarter. So every 3 months. So say again, this is just the example that we've come up for seagrasses. NOAA has predetermined, what's it called? Predetermined attributes that you need to fill out for oyster reefs, wetland restoration, and fish passage. The other 5 habitats in this project, the IRLNEP has kind of put together these quarterly reporting forms. And again, once the monitoring form has been approved by NOAA, all these forms will be available to everybody. I kind of buzzed through it really quick, but I have a list at the end. It's a form of all the dates of when your quarterly monitoring forms are going to be due. And I'll send that out to everybody after this webinar. So the PPR, or the performance progress report, is submitted biannually. Its purpose is to kind of track the overall project outcomes and progress. So each report is going to include your project objectives and accomplishments, any challenges or obstacles that you've overcome, obstacles you've encountered, your next steps and upcoming activities. And you're going to also kind of attach your 2 quarter reporting forms to this biannual form as well. So I put a note at the bottom. We actually have a meeting with Aaron and Chris next week to kind of talk about what we need to fill out specifically for this form. If it's super in depth, we're probably going to do another webinar to kind of go through the entire form so we can all fill it out together. This form was Exhibit B in everybody's contract. So I just wanted to put that out there. So you guys have seen the PPR before. You can just go back to your contract, Exhibit B. Okay. So the administrative report. This is also submitted biannually and focuses on the budget management sections and focuses on compliance. So the key sections are budget expenditures, personal and labor reporting, any changes to the project scope or deliverables. A submission template will guide you through the process. And again, we have a meeting with NOAA next week, whether to discuss whether this is something the NEP is going to fill out or if we're going to have each of the subcontractors fill out for their sites. So submission guidelines. So all reports, so each of the 4 reports that we talked about are going to be needed to be submitted to me at Ayres at IRL Council and also inputted into the NEP's ArcGIS Online Data Hub. So I asked, I think it was 2 or 3 meetings ago, who was the data entry person going to be for each project. So I've created a login and a username, and you're going to, and a login and a username for each unique data personnel, so that they can upload this information directly into, it's kind of a survey 1, 2, 3 style, really easy to follow for them. So every project has a submitted contact person. So if for whatever reason we have any questions with your reports, I'll reach out to them directly, but it goes both ways. I've put my email in this a few different times. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask either me, Dan, or Kevin, and we can help you. So like I said, this is kind of the pre-construction, post-construction, the quarterly report due dates, and the biannual PPR and due dates. So you'll notice that it's going to be, it's altered on April 15th and October 15th of every year. It's to give us that wiggle room if we notice anything wrong with the biannual report, so we can submit it by the deadline. I'm going to be sending this out to everybody as kind of like reminders for your calendars, as like, hey, you know, your quarterly report is due, just to make it easy for everybody and it's on everybody's calendars. So to kind of streamline the reporting process and to ensure compliance, it's kind of important just to maintain accurate and detailed records of all your project activities. I'm going to send you reminders for these details. You're probably going to get annoyed with me, but that's okay. And also align your reporting submissions with some project milestones. So these practices not only simplify the process, but they also improve the quality of the data that's submitted. And by staying organized, you'll be more focused on your project outcomes and less on the paperwork that goes along with it. So, so I'm going to leave it as this, and thank you guys all for your time, and hopefully that was pretty straightforward. Once the monitoring plan is approved, we'll send that out, and everybody will have these forms as well as the dates in their calendars for when everything is due. So with that, I guess I'd be happy to take any questions. I saw one for Dan. Did you already answered it? Oh, he did.
Yeah, I can read it aloud too. So let's see, I don't see it anymore. It disappeared. There it is. So it was asked if there's an item more than $10,000 purchased by a sub, well, should it be listed in the contractual or the capital expenditures? And my response was it all depends on the use of that item. So if the contractor is using it as part of their services being provided, then it stays within contractual. But if the contractor is buying it and then providing it to the sub-awardee for their own use, then now they've really become like a vendor of a supply, and it should be capital equipment.
If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll give each, I guess, give a little bit more time.
I know we breezed through it. But this should be a good reference for when we get to actual invoice submission or generation. People can come back and refer to this for what they may need. Although, you know, most of y'all have done this already, so it shouldn't be anything new. All right, well, I guess everybody knows what they're doing.
Awesome. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to email Dan, myself, or Kevin on the project, and we'll be sure to help you. And also too, this will be available on YouTube for reference on the One Lagoon YouTube channel. I'll send out the link after this webinar.
Yep. And we have a meeting on the performance progress reports on Monday to go over it in full detail. So if we find anything that's really useful, we'll make sure to share that with you all. So
All right. Well, have a good afternoon, everybody.